أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد وانتشت روحي وصار الدمع يجري يا إلهي خذ بقلبي للرشاد أشرقت نفسي بنور من فؤادي حينما رددت يا رب العباد.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for attending. As you all made aware, the topic of this session today is how minorities can create political power outside the system. We've invited Brother Jahangir Mohammed, who's a social analyst and the director of the Centre for Muslim Affairs, based in Manchester. He's kindly come over to share his thoughts and experience with us, and we'll have opportunity later on to give our input and see what Brother Jahangir's ideas are and how perhaps we've got similar situations or things at a local level that we'd like to have answers on that we may have not thought about. What he says may give rise to certain questions, so make note of them so you don't forget, and inshallah we'll be able to conclude with some questions and answers. I'll hand it over to Brother Jahangir.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to come to Blackburn to help the brothers here in all their activities, and I hope they go from strength to strength. This is a very important topic because often we do things and we carry on doing things, but we never go back and reflect, is this the right thing to do, or should we be adopting another strategy? And at times of crisis we reassess things and people get angry. But there's a lot of information out there that there are people who understand the political system, and we should take advantage of that knowledge. The first point I want to make, because whenever you debate with Muslims who have a particular perspective about the political system, and in the past I've had some debates with some of our brothers from overseas, particularly from the Arabic world, and whenever you debate with them, they'll say, oh, but these people don't know anything about British politics, as if they themselves, who've suddenly come here from another country with no experience of politics, know more about the system than we do. So the first point to make is this is my area of specialism. I did my degree in sociology with a specialism in social policy, and at the age of 23 I was a lecturer in social policy and public administration. And I'm not saying that to boast, just to give you the background. And then I've worked in local government for most of my life, so I have a very good understanding of the political system in this country and how it works. And also, as the brother said, I'm director of the Centre for Muslim Affairs, and my interest is to look at minorities and movements and see how they can generate power. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from, to see where we are and how others have done it, but also key for all Muslims is, there are some Islamic principles to achieving power and to doing certain things, because Islam is a guide for everything. I've got quite a lot of material to go through, so I'll start off by a brief assessment. Let's assess where we are today. History of Muslim involvement. When our parents came to this country many, many years ago, in the 50s and 60s, they were actually quite good. We might think they were backward and they didn't understand, but they were actually really quite good at defining something that they wanted and then working to achieve that. So you find that, with little education, with little resources, they established the abattoirs, the halal meat service. They wanted a mosque, they fought for it, they went there, they did it. If they wanted a business, shops, they helped each other, they gave each other loans, and they were really, I would say they put the roots down for us. But at some point we seem to have got lost. Instead of building on that, there came, especially with our involvement in what's known as the race relations industry, we started to adopt a different approach to dealing with our problems and dealing with ourselves as a community. And that's a sign of powerlessness, because when you're powerless, you allow other people to set your agenda and the way that you act and behave. And that's what the race relations industry did for us. They said, to become powerful, and they weren't really interested in Muslims becoming powerful. In fact, the early race relations industry wasn't interested in Muslims at all. They didn't even define us as Muslims. We were called Asians or blacks. We were part of this strata within the race relations industry. And the view was that to get on in this society, to achieve something, that you have to have numbers. It's called the numbers game. You have black people in councils, you have black people in positions of power in parliament. So the more numbers you have, the more powerful you become. And this is something that we've been taught and people have taken in. Even the black community, the Afro-Caribbean community, that's what they were sort of brought up on, that approach. And then came other ideas, things like Operation Black Vote, and now you have Operation Muslim Vote. So the idea is that somehow voting, joining a political party, becoming a councillor, becoming an MP, makes you powerful and influential. The reality is that today we have, I don't know if any of you saw the Muslim news last month. There's a list of, we had 160 new Muslim councillors elected in the last local elections. And on top of that, we've probably got many hundreds more already. So these were just the new ones. And so we have about 500-600 councillors. We have 8 members of parliament, so-called Muslim members of parliament. We've had Muslims in cabinet. And despite that, the Muslim community is still seen as powerless. We get picked on a daily basis. Islamophobia is increasing. We've had the Prevent policy, for example, which is the biggest single policy attacking all aspects of Muslim life. We've had terror laws. We've even had 42-day proposed detention for terror laws, and all the Muslim MPs voted for it. There wasn't one of the 4 in the last parliament who voted against it. And whenever a politician wants to make political capital, they pick on the Muslims. You've heard right here Jack Straw on the veil, on other aspects of Muslim life. So that's a sign that we really are not as powerful as we think we are, despite our numbers. And economically, we are becoming less powerful as well. Our economic situation is deteriorating. Okay, some people are getting richer, but for the masses, we are becoming a lot poorer. And the battle of ideas, we've lost that. The ideas about what it is to be a Muslim, how Muslims should live in this society. All that dialogue is decided by the neocons, the non-Muslims, the media, and we don't seem to be able to, even though we have Muslim groups out there who claim to represent Muslims, we don't seem to be able to stand up and have a powerful response. And yet we still go on talking about the numbers game. Every election, the same argument. Let's get people to vote. Let's have more numbers. Okay, and there are some lobby groups as well, say lobby. But the point is, you can be an MP, you can be a councillor, and you can lobby. Well, if you don't have power, that's a pointless exercise. You know, you have to have something else that makes you powerful. Becoming powerful means that you are more influential when you get into those positions or when you do something. And we still, we need to really understand why it is we're weak, and we can do that. I mean, firstly, we don't understand the political system. Muslims go and they'll elect their councillor or their MP, and when their MP then votes for a 42-day detention law, they become frustrated. Well, why is this happening? But if you understand the way party politics works and parliamentary politics works in this country, you'll understand that really, the chances of you becoming influential using that system and powerful are limited. It's everything else that you do outside the system that makes you powerful. So, for example, when you actually become a member of a party, you sign up to the rules and the terms and conditions of that political party. You sign up your allegiance to that party. You're giving yourself the allegiance to the party leader and the policies and the rules of that party. And what tends to happen is, you have to serve loyally. You have to become a loyal servant of that party to progress in that party. You have to say yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir, and you have to do that for about 10, 15 years. 10 years minimum in most cases before you actually get nominated for a seat to stand as an MP. And usually that's a seat that you can't win in the first instance. And then, after more service, 15 years, 20 years down the line, you get the chance to stand as an MP. And once you get into the Parliament, you have to start the whole loyalty again. You're not going to progress unless you say, yes, Mr. Miliband, yes, Mr. Cameron, I love your policies, I think this is fantastic. And it's, by the time you actually get in Parliament, there's so little Islam left, or Islamic thinking left, because you become trained in putting forward the policies of that particular party, thinking like that party. So when you get into Parliament, there's so little Islam left in your ideas and your thinking. I'm not saying people don't pray and do all that. I'm saying that actually your approach is a totally different approach. And also, loyalty decides how you vote. So, just to give an example, Sadiq Khan, one of the MPs, who was elected Muslim MP, very nice person, good human rights lawyer. So you'd think this is a man of principle. This is a man who stood for human rights before he got into Parliament, and then the same person votes for 42-day detention, which would have been a catastrophe for many Muslims up and down this country. So how do you square that out? It's because there's a whole system that demands loyalty and service and allegiance to the party and the leader. So it breaks you. I mean, you don't really have that much chance to manoeuvre. And they have something called the whip's office, and the parliamentary whip as well as the party whip. If you're still thinking about voting the other way, the whip's office will whip you into line, and you get all kinds of punishments and discipline for not voting in accordance with the way the party wants you to vote. Of course, there are some principled individuals in various parties who regularly vote against the party, but they don't have any aspirations of becoming progressing in the parliament or getting into a cabinet position. And so really your ability to do things are very limited. And we need to understand more about that system, and that's why, instead of becoming frustrated with the failures when we see our MPs up there, we need to understand that actually it's the system that's holding them back. I mean, the numbers game is so ridiculous because it relies on the principle, well, if a black person or a Muslim gets to become Prime Minister of England, well, we'll have power. Barack Obama is the first black president. His policies are almost exactly the same as Bush's policies towards the Muslim world. We've had a Muslim president of India. And more importantly, we have whole nations, so-called Muslim nations, where we're in the majority. And we're still not powerful as a Muslim community. So this idea of having numbers without anything else giving you the power is a false argument. In fact, Ken Livingstone, I'm sure you've all heard of him, has actually written, he's made a famous statement once, which is if voting could change anything, they would have abolished it. And he's actually written a book on that subject. And Tony Benn himself, this is a man who had been in politics all his life, most of his adult life. He said, when he retired from Parliament, he said, I'm leaving Parliament to enter politics. In other words, and the point is accurate, the real politics takes place outside Parliament. Parliament is just a theatre where the rubber stamping goes on. The real influence and politics is outside. And this is what Muslims don't understand. So, how is power generated in the British political system? Well, there's a whole host of interest groups out there and movements. Labour movement, professional institutes, the BMA, British Medical Association, and they're active. They get together to define their own agenda, they push their own agenda, and they influence, they generate influence outside the political system until really, what goes through Parliament is a rubber stamp. I mean, a perfect example of this is the Prevent policy. The Prevent policies, nearly all the policies to do with government terrorism have been defined by neoconservatives linked to the United States and people in this country, think tanks like the Centre for Social Cohesion, Policy Studies. There's a whole host of them in America. These are the think tanks that actually define the wars. They are the ones who pushed for the wars in the Muslim world. And they have big backers, financial backers. And this is what influences. And the civil servants, in most cases, it's the civil servants who write the policies and to give them to the MPs and the ministers and say, let's do it this way. And you'll find that when one party goes, they might say a lot of things in their manifesto, but when it comes to the practice, they change. And you find there's very little difference, because what's happening is, behind the MPs, if there was no MPs, government would still continue with the civil service and other institutions in this country. So those policies are gradual policies, so they keep on going and going, they've already decided. So, for example, unemployment policies. You have policies that people have written, then they'll change them, and the logical progression is maybe what the Conservatives are doing now, because some of those policies will have been already talked about and decided. So you get slight changes, but not a great deal of change. Same with the NHS reforms. You know, a lot of these policies are already on the table when the ministers come to power and the MPs come to power. And more importantly these days, I mean, there's a concept that's been developed, especially in the United States, but here as well, democracy for sale. In other words, these days the real power lies with corporate and financial interests. I don't know if you can remember the last election. Nobody was saying, well, what do the people want? If you look at all the commentary, it's fascinating. So, what does the market say? If we're going to get a coalition government, what does the market make of this? Because money has become God, unfortunately. And the market decides. The corporate interests decide what Cameron will do, regardless of what his voters say. And they have that influence. They buy lobbyists, they buy power, they buy research, the best brains to influence. So the chances of you becoming influential in that system just by having numbers is very limited. So those are some of the arguments about the system. Let's talk about, I mean, there are communities obviously who are powerful. So although we have all these competing interests, I want to look at a couple of examples of how communities have been able to influence them. And the biggest one is the Jewish community for us, because whenever we talk, we say, well, the Jewish community is powerful. And I don't want to get into conspiracy theories. You know, the Jewish community is powerful. They themselves admit it. The books. And we don't have a problem with that. Islam does not have a problem with people becoming powerful. Islam has a problem with people misusing that power to oppress others. That's the difference. And the Jewish community is a perfect example for us because they have religious similarities, cultural similarities, and also in terms of size. I mean, and they have a long history. 1% of the population. They've always been around that, and yet they've got 40 MPs. And this is what our people will say: we need to be like the Jews. They have 40 MPs. If we get 40 MPs, we'll be powerful. And they don't see everything else that the Jewish community has done. The Jewish community is powerful not because of those 40 MPs. It's because of all the other things that they do outside that political system and have done for centuries. In fact, most of their experience in Europe, they've been excluded from. They weren't allowed to go into Parliament. And a really fascinating history. In fact, we have a contribution. I mean, one of the main reasons that the Jewish community has become powerful has been because of their ability to organise themselves as a community. And this is the lesson here. If you look at any group, you'll find that their ability to organise, to self-organise, to mobilise themselves is what gives them power. And I was reading through some fascinating history. We've actually played a role in making the Jewish community powerful. I don't know if any of you know that. I mean, the Jewish community, just to give you a bit of background, they've been in this country since 1066, Norman conquest. And they were excluded from a lot of traditions, professions and other places of work. And the Jewish community initially became powerful throughout Europe because they were able to lend money at interest. I mean, in this country, lending money at interest was a sin. It was haram. It was forbidden. I don't know if people knew that, but in the 12th and 13th century, the Catholic Church said it was sinful to lend money and charge interest. It was haram. But the Jewish community, because they weren't Catholic, they could do it. So it was permissible for them to do it. And very soon they became powerful. A lot of people became money lenders, and a lot of the rulers, the kings, and even some of the churches, Westminster Cathedral, a lot of these cathedrals were built with Jewish money. I mean, absolutely fascinating history. And this propensity to become influential using finance and then have a major say on kings or the barons, often led to them being persecuted as well. Because when the people couldn't pay off the loans, they started killing the Jews or confiscating their property. So, I mean, just a fascinating bit of history. At one point in 1198, 1/3 of all coins, money, issued in this country was in the hands of no more than a few hundred Jewish people, and that says a lot about the influence that they had, and this became a source of problems. So in 1275, Edward I passed a law called the Jewish Affairs Bill, in which he forbid Jewish people to charge interest on money lending. And then
This was, sorry, when was it?
it was in 1275. And obviously, at one point before that, actually an exchequer of the Jews was created. The Jews had to register all their property and all their finances, and the exchequer, and they were harshly treated. They were, they were charged extra taxes, and whenever they needed money for crusades and other things, they would extract more taxes from the Jews. And eventually, things came to a head, and they were expelled from England. So that all the Jews were expelled in 1290 from England, and they were excluded for 350 years from England. They weren't allowed back.
Expelled to Europe?
Wherever. But a lot of them obviously were in Muslim lands, went to Muslim lands. But obviously Islamic Spain was the golden age of the Jewish community, and they flourished in all aspects, and we partly are responsible for them being able to organise themselves. This is my reading of the situation, and I'll tell you why. Have any of you heard a term called, in a Spanish word called al-jama? No? It's actually an Arabic word, and it's al-jama. And it means, this is the beauty of Islam, that there's another word which was used for the Jews, which is the ghetto. That was when the Christians were in power in Venice. They used to put them in a walled area, and that was known as the ghetto. Now, Islam gave other communities the ability to organise themselves. So we had Al-Jama'ah of the Jews. So they had, under Islamic rule, they were given the ability to self-govern themselves. They had their own laws, their own rules and regulations, their own Beth Din, the courts. They would decide on their own disputes, and of course they became involved in wider society. Now, in the West they like to turn this round and say, well, Muslims were harsh. The dhimmis were, for those of you who don't know, dhimmi was the title, it's protected communities in Islam, minority communities. And they say, well, they were taxed. They used to get taxes from them. Well, that's because, zakat and all the other Islamic taxes were not liable on the Jews. But because they were living in Islamic lands and they were being protected, they had to pay some tax. So they paid the jizya, the poll tax, for the protection and some of the other things that the state provided. So it wasn't that the Jews were persecuted. And the Jewish, if you look at Jewish writing, you'll read yourselves that it was the golden age of Jewish life in Europe. So we partly helped them become organised. And when the Spanish Inquisition happened, and Muslims and Jews were expelled or forcibly Christianized, a lot of them then came to other places. Oliver Cromwell had allowed the Jews back into England. And there are two categories of Jews. There are the Sephardi Jews from Iberian Peninsula, from Spain and Portugal, and the Ashkenazi Jews from Holland and Germany. So you find they come to England, and already having that experience of being organised, what do? And this is something that, before they ever went into Parliament, what do? They organised themselves. They created something called the Jewish Board of Deputies. It's over 250 years old. So it was created. Actually, the first institution that they created, which is strange, is the Jewish Initiation Society, which was getting all the medics together to make sure they do circumcision properly. They created something in 1760 called the Committee of Deputies, and again, deputies came from the Portuguese deputado, which means to represent or to represent the interests of the community. And that organisation has been the cornerstone of Jewish strength in this country. It brought the synagogues together. They all sent deputies, and from that they established all the organisations that they needed. I mean, it partly helped because there was no welfare state in those days, and you had to look after your own community. And they were forbidden from going into Parliament and a lot of trades. But they had their own Beth Din, their own court, their own system, and every organisation that they needed, schools, from self-help, they created them. And by the beginning of the 20th century, I'll circulate this for you to look at. It's an absolutely... I mean, this is just a list of all the organisations they created by the 1900s. Everything. They didn't need anybody to look after them. They looked after themselves. They gave people loans, they got them into business, they helped each other. Have a look at that. And as a result of that ability to be able to organise themselves as a community and almost self-govern themselves and become a government within another society, they became powerful. And when they were allowed to enter Parliament, obviously they were influential enough. And the other things they did, they got into all the professions. We should learn from this example. Become part of all the professional bodies. Become part of the leading professionals. You enter into business. But another thing that we have forgotten is, they became influential in ideas, in writings, in literature, in thinking, influencing the ideas around them. We are so weak that, when the Rushdie affair happened, do you know how many philosophers we had Muslims in this country, who could challenge some of the philosophical... We had one, Dr. Shabir Akhtar. So that's what makes them powerful and influential. They created all the institutions they need. They were politically active in their own community. They were self-organised, and that remains the case today. I think in the early 20th century they had the Jewish free schools. Had 4,000 pupils. It's the biggest school in Europe, of any school, not just Jewish. So that's, and then they did something else, of course, and this is an example of power. towards the end of the 19th century, we had somebody called Theodor Herzl, father of the Zionist movement. So they created this political movement as well. They weren't just content with being self-organised and powerful here, because they knew that even though they had been powerful in Europe before and strong, they were always subject to persecution, and something called the Jewish question used to come up. How are we going to make sure that we never get persecuted again? How are we going to make sure we never get oppressed, killed, slaughtered again? And the Zionist movement, a political movement, was a reaction to that. We need a state of our own that's powerful. And by, within 50 years, imagine how much power they created. Within 50 years, they had created the State of Israel. So from a dream to making something a reality, 50 years. That's how long it took them. And they all contributed to it. They had a movement of 1 million people, just a decade, 2 decades after the Zionist movement was formed, and also they created the Zionist Jewish Colonial Trust, which was a bank to finance the State of Israel. They really went out of their way. So they defined their agenda and they went for it. So this is the way. And if you look at other communities, we move away from the Jewish community. The Labour Party itself, it was the creation of a movement. So working people coming together to fight for their own rights. And it all started with a simple committee. A few people getting together, defining their agenda and working for it. The women's movement, the suffragettes, how did women get the vote? They did the same thing. They got together, they got organised, they had an agenda. In fact, there were two groups. One of them was a bit more moderate and believed in working through some of the parliamentary politics. And after some time that didn't work, and the other, Emmeline Pankhurst, she decided that we need to be more radical, started storming the parliament, challenging the system, and doing things that got her imprisoned, and through that, making themselves influential. That's how they gained the vote. And I could go through many examples. Civil rights movement in the United States, the gay movement here, very powerful. How did they do it? Women's movement and the Afro-Caribbean people, how did they get their rights? It wasn't because they were in Parliament. It was all because they had to fight for end to discrimination and these type of things. And you just need to look at what's happening in the Arab world today. Nobody who worked through those systems ever got into power or changed it. It's only when you realise that coming together as groups of people, working together, setting your own agenda, becoming financially able, and it's hard work. And somebody was saying to me the other day, the only place that where success comes before work is in the dictionary. So you have to become, you have to work at it. The idea that you turn up one day on 5th of May and put a cross on the box and that will change your destiny and help you become influential, absolutely nothing will come of that. So if we want to become powerful, we have to do a lot more. And I urge you to study something. I could talk for ages. The Quaker movement. It's another movement. I've studied a lot of these movements, and you find the same thing in there. But there is a difference. We can learn everything we want from these communities and from all these principles of power. And many of them are, if you study them, there's a science. You learn that if people do things in a certain way, they will achieve something. And the Quran actually supports that, because the Quran is scientific, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us how to become organized. But there is a difference, and I want to mention this because Muslims often don't understand this. And the difference is that we are not Jews and we are not any other community. So first of all, we're not going to become financially powerful by charging interest. We're not allowed to. So that's the first thing. Secondly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in the Quran that He's blessed you with this deen, this perfect way of life. And it is the deen for everybody, for all of mankind, not just for Muslims. And therefore, when we become powerful, it's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you don't go into politics to become powerful for your own sake, to promote your own career. You become powerful to establish the authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the difference. And you don't oppress others. You know, when you are a Muslim, if you become powerful, you use it to achieve justice for others. Not just for Muslims, but you don't oppress non-Muslims, as I've given you the examples in Islamic Spain. You know, what wonderful terms, you know, even the description of the Jewish community. I mean, we, you know, as minorities, you think how we get described. You know, sometimes by the politicians and the state. But, you know, to describe Al-Jama'ah of the Jews, the community of the Jews, you know, the Jewish quarter, the Jewish area, you know, what respectful way to describe other people. And so we must never get into power to oppress. And when we do become powerful, you have to advance the interests not just of your own community. This is where we make a mistake. You know, often not only are we looking after, we claim we're looking after the Muslim interest, but actually we're looking after our, you know, village interest or our country or our national interest. So you have to make the society around you better. And again, I want to draw the description between colonialism, where the West went into the Muslim and rest of the world. They went there, they brought the money back and invested in the mother country. So they looted those nations, exploited them, put the money here. Islam never did that. Wherever Muslims went, they made sure they built those societies. They created hospitals, institutions, and all the things that those societies needed. So this is a difference. We don't take money and send it off to a mother country somewhere and say, you know, let's suck the wealth out of this country and make these people poorer. That's not the Islamic way. And the final difference is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He's given you this deen, He actually tells you that after this, you've been provided with this deen, the way of life. If you follow any other, then you will not have any power. You will not have any protector. And this is something we don't understand. Now, even, I mean, I'll talk about here, but let's talk about the Muslim world. How many times, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you a book which tells you, go this way, don't go that way, avoid these people, don't do this, don't do that. And what do? We do all of those things. So, and then we say, well, our situation in the Muslim world is bad. You know, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, don't take Yahud and Nasara or those who are not inside your ranks as awliya, and I'm not saying don't be friends with Jews and Christians, that's not what it means. You know, if you can marry a Jewish woman, you can be more than friends. So what that means is at the political level. At the political level, you must never take Yahud and Nasara as your awliya, because they will not fail to corrupt you, as the Quran says, and they are awliya of each other. And what do they do in the Muslim world? all our leaders, take them as friends, as awliya, and then we look at the situation and we say, oh, it's going to get better. No, it's not, because you disobeyed an instruction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the same here. We have to organise ourselves as a community. We have to have some principles. There's a beautiful example I want to give you. And again, it's very... there's a verse in the Quran which describes this. I was on a management course a long time ago. And management now is a science. They can tell you, if you want to get the best out of this human being, you do this. Leadership is this. The ability to organise, achieve something is doing this. So they gave a beautiful example. They said, well, if you look at this flock of geese, how are they organised? So next time I urge you to look at it. Anybody know?
One is watching. One is watching out.
No, they're like exactly. They're like a V shape.
When they fly, in flight.
They're a community.
Yeah.
So they fly, and one is out in front.
Follow the leader.
But what they do, when that front one gets tired,
The ultimate.
goes back,
Yeah.
another one takes his turn. When one gets injured and is going down, they all go down with him. They either, if it dies, they make sure they go with it, or then they come back. So they try and look after their own. Now this is, and what do we do? The Muslims, we have no concept. If you have one out at the front, he'll be there for the next 30, 40 years. The leader. By the time he gets tired, there's nobody left behind him, because everybody's left. They've had enough. If somebody dies, he's gone now, forget it. If somebody gets injured. And this principle is fantastic, because this shows that you have an ideology. How can you belong to another ideology? So, and this is what Muslims have been doing. They've been embracing fascism, communism, nationalism, capitalism, every other way of life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you, and He says there's a beautiful verse in the Quran, one of my favourite verses, which is Surah Al-An'am 6:38, and it says, there is not a moving creature on earth or a bird that flies with its two wings, but are communities like you. We have neglected nothing in this book. Then unto their Lord will return. Now, if you look at that example of that geese, so every community, including the animal world and the bird life, is organised as a community, and they have leadership. They have somebody out there as an Amir, and this is an important principle. 3 of you are on a journey, choose one of your Amir, famous hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's more verses. Inshallah, one day if I have the time, I want to go through the Quran and because it's my area in social organisation and social policy, draw all these things out from it. But there's another verse that says when you're fighting the enemy, when you're in a battle, fight as if you're a solid cemented structure. It's like a brick wall. Every brick is connected to the other. So you find the principles of organisation in the Quran and Islam, and there's so many others. So if we don't do that, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is almost telling you, get yourself organised. And in another verse He tells you, if you are not powerful, because you hold the message, the last and final message and the truth, people will oppress you. It's not that they hate you, it's the truth that you possess that they hate. So in another verse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, you should be so strong that if somebody is even thinking about messing with a Muslim, that they would think twice. So how can you be that if you're not organised at all? So this is the principles. These are some of the principles. We could go on forever. So really, you have to as a community have your own agenda. You have to work together to achieve that agenda. And there's no simple shortcut to this. It could take years of hard work. But you have to start somewhere. And the point is that what we need to start is a group of people in every town or city. I mean, simply getting together once a month. In one town that I worked, what we did was we got together, a few of us. I'm not saying leaders, because what we want to be is, a community of leaders. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Mr. Khan videos on BBC. Mr. Khan, community leader. This sums up our community. Google it tonight on BBC and you'll have a good laugh and you'll have a good sleep. but some of those things are realistic. When we talk about bringing a community together, everybody thinks it's about making them leaders. It's not. Leadership is about providing leadership to the community and exercising that on their behalf. So that's what we should be doing. And there's a concept in Islam which is that for people to be able to bring communities together, you have to have some individuals who can take a situation together and put it back again. So it's almost like somebody can analyse what's going on and put it back together again. That's an important principle in Islam, and we need to start that. You'll find just by having some of the people, key people, if they don't come, it doesn't matter, some of them won't, just have a monthly meeting, have a cup of tea. What are the issues? That organisation, that's how it starts. Say, this is an issue for us, how are we going to sort it out? You start working towards that. And over time, that organisation, that ability to self-organise will emerge. I mean, that's what our grandparents and our parents did when they came. Imagine, they didn't speak English, there were no race relations laws, they couldn't get mortgages, and yet they bought their own houses, cash, no interest. They established their businesses, they even looked after their families back home. They built 1,000 mosques, 50 Islamic schools have been built. It just shows what you can do if you mobilise yourself and organise yourself. Unfortunately, we've gone too far the other way, where we rely on the welfare state, we rely on local democracy and say, well, I've put my X in the box, now everything will be fine, now we'll be powerful. We'll get so many people, we don't like his views, so we'll put X against that and we'll get rid of him. And we never do get rid of those people, because we fail to realise that as soon as you put somebody up against them, the other party will put another Muslim there and they'll divide you. And some Muslims will always support that guy because they're part of the party. So I think we need to make a start. It's long overdue. And the leadership and the organisation doesn't come. We've had organisations at national level. Organisation doesn't come from the top. It starts with you here. I mean, if you were to, I don't want to, make it into a big thing because people get nervous. But call it something, Blackburn Leadership Council or something like that, or Blackburn Interest Council, something represents
interest.
They're not interested. And just meet.
That's a good idea.
That's not defined the
It's not defined the name, but because people get threatened. They think, they're trying to establish themselves, they belong to that. But really, if you get a group of people committed to the ability to define their own agenda and create organisation, I can assure you that will take place. It'll be slow, and you'll need lessons, and you need to bring people in, youngsters who've got skills and abilities. But inshallah, there's no reason why we can't do it. Other communities have done it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you you'll be able to do it. But you have to follow the ways that He's shown you and avoid the pitfalls that he's shown you on the way. That's all I have to say, so I'll take questions after that.
Sure, yeah, it's 7:30, so we can take a few to start off with.
I'll have a question. Do you have any examples, brother, as you study these groups of a particular Muslim group within the UK? Can you name one?
Studied Muslim groups?
No, in the sense you mentioned at the beginning that you study these minority groups.
Yeah, Jewish community.
No, particularly from the Muslim community. Do you have any examples?
So we're recruiting, have you got an example of, you mentioned about people getting together and mobilising themselves?
Well,
have you got an example of something where we can sort of
there are unfortunately, the communities that are best organised are the ones that we sometimes consider not totally Muslims. So you'll find that for example, the Qadianis, very organised. Aga Khan is very organised. Dawoodi Boras, very organised. They have everybody in their community. Because they're smaller groups, they have the ability to, even now, the Shia community, I didn't mention that the Jewish community really has become powerful because of the creation of the State of Israel. But even the Shia community, since the creation of the state in Iran, has become more and more influential and powerful in different countries. So there are groups out there, Muslim groups. Should I continue after this? Sure. And that's what it is. You can find lots of these.
I suppose it's good that way.
Yeah, good little groups everywhere. Youth groups. They're all doing things.
Do you want to pose a question while we start recording? And
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I know about your geese analogy.
geese analogy.
The geese you're saying.
You're going to point out a flaw in the geese analogy. Is that what it is?
Possibly, yeah. But the geese,
He's our goose expert, so
they fly in this particular. So I'm told, because I don't know for sure myself, is because it makes flight easier for the one behind. And one of the beauty of it, they're all charmed together. But it's served by self-interest first, rather than the
Sorry, what's your point?
But they're working together.
No, they're preserving themselves first, and then they are working.
No, if it was just self-preservation, then they wouldn't take turns at the front, would they?
No.
They all recognise that to work together they have...
Recognise it, but they're not only that, they charm to encourage the other. So when they sing, it continues as one flat format.
Yeah.
I should read that in the one-minute manager. Yeah.
Well, they use that as well. Organisation.
Yeah.
I was sitting at this lecture and my mind went to the verse in the Quran. It's fascinating.
Well, even some of the the business model, if you really think about it, even in the early 90s, when we started talking about having the attention or the will to do something is the need, the we call it. And one of the biggest successes is kept mentioning that if you have the intention to do it, you already achieved what you call it like what it says. And it's the need that is the same foundation and principles. So a lot of us, if you start studying Islam, you just stop making.
So let me ask you a question. I know sorry to interrupt you eating, but we're all eating, but I won't get caught on camera, so I'll have another one, please. I guess the reality of our communities, we talked about the Jewish community, and we okay, they're not an example, but I guess have the Jewish community demonstrated coming together as a single entity? And is that what makes them successful? And if so, what are the chances of that happening with the Muslim communities, not just in the UK but in Blackburn? Let's just take Blackburn. We've probably got about 10 different Muslim communities who all. It's like one of the attendees. He's gone now. The Holger, who's a German brother, and he mentioned to someone else who was coming here. And he said, "Well, it's at Randall Street Masjid. Don't go there. Don't go. What are you going there for? You know what they're like." And it's so. How on earth are we meant to come together to be self-sustaining? And is that possible when we've got 10 different divisions and 40 different masjids? Is that the first challenge, and can we overcome it?
Well, it obviously is. You know, that's exactly how the Jewish community started. They got the representatives were from the synagogues. So that, to answer the first bit of your question, getting together and organising themselves is one of the most important factors in their success. But the others are also that, you know, they make themselves successful in all the professions, financially powerful, economically powerful. I mean, you can't have power without economic strength either. And so they have that. But also they work together to get more of their community. So they've got an active interest in developing individuals within their own community to make sure they're at the top of whatever profession they are and successful as a business. And also I mentioned, you know, ideas is a key one. Influential thinkers, especially in a lot of ideas, so they might not be within the parties, but you find a lot of, even in the early days, a lot of thinking, a lot of writing, a lot of intellectual thought came from them. And we haven't learned that we have to develop our own ideas and project them within the wider society. And often what tends to happen is, you know, when ideas emerge and when you have organisation, you have movements that project those ideas, and the political parties or the system takes some of those ideas on because it realises that this is a change that's happening. Exactly as in the Arab world. You know, until the last day they were supporting Mubarak, and now, you know, they were saying Muslims can't have this, they can't do this, we can't let the Muslim Brotherhood in power, and then now they've all the thinking has suddenly changed, somersaulted, because the facts on the ground and the movement and the thinking coming out, the young people are saying certain things, so it's changed their view. I mean, that's the big advantage. The Jewish community obviously did have their differences in the early days, but they've been here so long that although they have their differences, it's marginal, you can't notice it. Obviously we've come from different cultural backgrounds. Muslim community, with a much bigger community, different parts of the world, and different schools of thought, sects within the schools of thought. So it's very difficult. And even, you know, I often give an example, you know, if somebody opens a bookshop, somebody else will open a bookshop with the opposite. Same with a TV channel. You'll get one TV channel and say, well, we need to have a Braille channel now, we need to have this channel. And it's the same with our organisation. Every organisation is sectarian based. And we have to find a way of bringing people together, not around those issues, but around community issues. So getting them all together and saying, look, you know, communities getting poorer, or marriages are breaking down, or these are issues happening in our community. Identifying the common goals of the community, and you find that at the Islamic level that there really isn't that much difference. You might have a few differences here and there theologically, but if you go into those you end up in more conflict situations. So it's almost having a black box and saying, you know, these differences, we'll park them We put them in our block box.
Is that realistic though? I think you know, so what you're saying, it sounds good in principle, but realistically, if I look at Blackburn, it will never happen.
No, I think it will happen because, you know, what will happen is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it happen, because when you don't follow His way, you know, as in the organisation and coming together as a community, you'll find that your situation does become worse, you become more oppressed, and then you're forced to change.
Yeah, I think we just said that it needs to get to that stage.
Yeah, it needs to,
we hope about the.
that stage, or we should be at a stage or worse now, aren't we?
yeah. Or you know, I mean, I think we have to be hopeful.
Yeah.
Because as we need to realise that a lot of those things that the religious leaders brought are no longer relevant to this society. A lot of those sectarian approaches, and you know, even some of the lectures that they give. I mean, they don't really have any meaning to young people here. So they have to start addressing these issues, otherwise they will lose their support in the mosques as well.
But I would argue the converse. I would say that the people who are giving these lectures are actually getting stronger, getting more popular.
I think it's happened in...
There's a trend of that, certainly,
I think it was
isn't there?
going the other way. In the last 10 years it slipped back because the government has been playing on some of these differences, and some people have spotted an opportunity to highlight, you know, we're not like them, we're like this, we're better Muslims than they are. So it's gone the other way a bit. But I think you have to get people around the table. You have to start, even if it's, if people don't come, even if it's, you know, half a dozen people, it doesn't matter. Start thinking about
You
these
mean
things.
this 6 here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how, I'll give you a beautiful example, right? But this is an example of Allah's promise. Allah's promises, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's promises that He will give you power in the land. That's His promise, that if you work to His agenda, He will make you powerful. And one of the things that struck me about Bosnia and Alija Izetbegovic, now this was communism, and going back to our discussion, the Muslims were very well integrated in all the political system in Yugoslavia. They were in the military, they were in high office in politics, and you know, everything that our politicians want to achieve. And there was one group amongst that group, Sarajevo 12, led by Dr. Alija Izetbegovic. All they did was they, like a little, I've actually seen the place they used to meet, and you know, one of his friends is now a newspaper editor, met him. All they used to do was meet about Islam and having an Islamic political, Islamic party and Islamic state. They met, got arrested, Alija Izetbegovic got put in prison for having meetings. Wrote a book. And what did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala do? Because they were actually committed to the Islamic ideals and principles. I have some differences with what happened after they got into power, but you know what happens? Yugoslavia breaks into pieces. Who's granted power? Alija Izetbegovic and his group. Now this is, you know, you need to ponder on that. What did they do before that? They didn't really have any organisation structure. It was just influencing people with their ideas and their thoughts. So I think if they can do that and really not organise themselves as a community or anything, I think we can do a lot better. It just takes the commitment and the will, and you have to do it. It's going to be difficult. I don't doubt that it's going to be hard. I know it's hard. I know how hard it is to make Muslims break out of this barrier. You know, everything is, but you have to have people who can, you know, talk to these people and break that and say, look, you know, a lot of this, as I've said before, is a lot of what's being practiced is secondary theology. and this is going to become less and less relevant to Muslims. It already is to a lot of youngsters.
By secondary, you mean?
Well, a lot of it is secondary. It's not going back to the Prophet's time. Some of it is layer upon layer of different scholars, and
not from the original
not
source.
from the original source. And that's the challenge. Almost everything we've got, is from a secondary, a third, sometimes fourth, sometimes fifth. Sometimes I see a book, and people have written everything from some scholars in the 15th and 16th century. There's no, why don't you go back to the Quran? There was a bookshop. We used to run a bookshop in Cheetah Mill many years ago, and I had a young brother who was working in there, and he came in, a big white bloke with a beer belly t-shirt, actually had a glass of beer on it. And he was interested in Islam, and the brother in the bookshop happened to be of a Braillery background, and the guy said, I'm interested, and I was watching what he was doing, and he's offering me this book, this book, this book. The guy wanted to know about Islam. I said, listen brother, just give him the Quran. And the Englishman said to him, see, that's what you need to do. I said, just give him God's word, Allah's word from the Quran, and don't give him all the additional bits. He doesn't need to know that. He's just and the guy became a Muslim eventually. So, but this is the mentality that we've got. We have to come at it from this angle, from that angle. And a lot of these community issues that we're organising ourselves on don't necessarily need a theological argument about them.
Yeah, Richard. Okay. Let's have some questions, please, you guys. I know you're all.
One of the questions I had was, you talked about our forefathers when we came to this country in the 60s and the 50s, and how well they organised and developed themselves as a community. Why do you think we've gone backwards since then? We should have progressed, generation by generation. Why do you think we've gone further away from, achieving that sustainability of that continuity?
Well, I think there was a stage when a lot of the younger people thought that the elders were backward, and because they weren't as educated, and the welfare state came. People started becoming reliant on the welfare state, on their local councils, local politicians, and as I said, the race relations industry was pushing this argument. More people, numbers, have a few more Asian faces, Asian faces there. So we actually didn't, and funding was available. And also, one of the things that happened, a lot of funding from the Middle East started coming here. All the early mosques were funded by our own resource, and then funding came from the Middle East. So we got people involved in religious organisations who, a lot of them were career Muslims. They saw Islam as a career, and a dependency on easy money basically came along and weakened our approach to things. And now, when you study that, we realise that actually, some of them went through enormous hardship. Islamic schools. Most of the counsellors at the time were opposed to Islamic schools. It's only because they were so stubborn, our elders said, no, we must have this Islamic, we must have single-sex schools. Because they were so adamant in their beliefs that they succeeded. But somehow we got this belief that the next generation, our counsellors and others, the race relations industry, we've got this idea that that's all in the past. We've now got racial equality and all that, and things have moved on. Whereas we can learn a lot. Now.
Absolutely, that's a key thing. Is you've got to learn from.
Just imagine. How they lent money to each other. They had that committee system. If you had a wedding, everybody put in money. If you needed money, no interest. Now, we've got cheap credit everywhere.
Exactly.
But what's happening is, what people don't realise is, the more you go into those, the more, not only tied down, not only but it's leaving your community. That money goes to a bank somewhere.
Yeah, become individuals, don't
Yeah.
you? Yeah.
So that money is going away from you, whereas they have this concept of retaining that wealth within each other. I mean, now, unfortunately, you can't even lend money to a Muslim because they won't give it you back. That's the other thing. The trust has broken down as a result of that. But we need to, we need to talk about these things. We need to argue that these are the things that our forefathers did, and we want to go back to building self-reliance, self-governance within our communities, and we can overcome all these problems. There's a lot of wealth there. I mean,
Absolutely, there's more wealth now than
how much zakat do we collect? I mean, every man and his dog has got a charity.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So many charities, but they're all funding things overseas. And what about here? What about the generations here? No. I mean, even if a proportion of it went into institutions, we don't have a single think tank. Not just here in the Muslim world. We've got neocon think tanks that analyse everything that's happening in the
You
Muslim.
said Muslim affairs.
Yeah, well, apart from we don't have any resources, that's okay. But if there was a fully resourced think tank with staff, all these policies won't be a problem to analyse. I mean, I've been analysing the neocon policies before they went to war in Iraq. You put those ideas out there on the table, you warn your community what's going on, you develop an approach. But we seem to be incapable of doing these things, or not committed.
So let me ask you one question, and from a mosque representative, and you thought about setting this body up and funding. If I put a proposal to you and say, right, okay, in Blackburn, there's 6 or 7 mosques that we might be able to get on board and say, right, okay, we will do some of that work, like the zakat and stuff like that, and we can set something up. What would you say to that?
Well, that's exactly what we're talking about, isn't it?
But we need somebody that will take that step and say, right, okay, we need to set that structure up.
Yeah.
I couldn't, the thing that you talked about, generalising, it's not.
Whatever help you need, we provide. If we need to set it up, I mean, that's, we've got to get young people on board. I'll help you in whatever way I can. We'll set it up. It's not a problem.
He doesn't only talk, he's a doer as well.
We, in Manchester, we do things.
I think really, what we think it needs commitment.
That's
This is hard. This is
the majority of the time, as I tell you, the difficulty from personal. If you come with an idea, you have to run it yourself. You have to follow it through, and there's only so much energy and strength you get. You get to the stage, you want to pass that back on to somebody, and you can't do it. You look around and they say, "Well, don't give me that."
No, I mean, obviously, certain amount of. I mean, what tends to also happen is as I said, we're a community of leaders rather than leaders of communities, and we need to develop people as we go along. We don't always give young people the responsibility as well. Obviously, you have to provide guidance, but let's get young people involved in these things. There's plenty of them out of work there, and eventually some of these institutions that we build, they'll start working in.
That's an example. I mean, I've talked to people who've got degrees coming out their ears, but they're just working at McDonald's or Tesco and things like that. It's like, okay, if they can't find work professionally, why can't we use their skills? Remember, they've been educated to a degree level. Why can't their skills be utilised within our own community?
Why they're not coming forward? That's my question.
Well, I think the
They're not. We have these, and I tell you, I get frustrated with it. And even I've got people working at McDonald's and stuff like that. In the concepts in here, I said, organisation-wise, structure-wise, there's so much work to do. And going to any organisation and say, yeah, I developed this, I did this, this is the evidence. That's a big strength for them, you know. And yet, these people that you're taking, so you look around, nobody comes forward. Nobody's coming into the, you know.
Well, it's twofold. There's, okay, they don't come forward, but is there something there for them to come forward to say, okay, I'll actually, there's this work going on here, I'll contribute to that.
Yeah.
Or is there this, you know, if you want to set something up, is that entity calling out to people who've got degrees but they're sitting down doing nothing on a minimum wage job?
I think they do have
Because they'll have 8 years, 10 years in that same job and they'll forget everything they learned in the degree. We need them fresh.
I think there's a particular problem about young people getting involved in projects with mosques.
Well, I think that's not just a Muslim or an Asian issue. It's across the board. It's about engaging with people, isn't it? So if you look at any communities, you know, they often talk about the white working class community and Blackburn, same issues. Because to me, a lot of the issues that I think you mentioned when you were talking before earlier about economics. Yeah. I think it's all well and good when communities economically viable, efficient, whatever you want to call the right word. Yeah, powerful. We as a community aren't there yet. And I think it's going to take a lot of work, effort, both educational, business-wise, you mentioned, in terms of getting us there. And that's the key thing, because I think whatever you look at, yes, religion is important, but what really gives you the power, unfortunately, is wealth and economics. And it's how do we as a community, within the Islamic envelope, make ourselves economically, you know, and financially reliable, powerful. Because you talked about, you know, degree holders working in McDonald's. If that's the only job going, that's the only job they're going to do, aren't they? They've got to pay their bills somehow. And
Utilize the skills.
Absolutely, yeah. But what I'm saying is, if you're there, you're doing a 40-hour shift, or you know, you're a common Pakistani Muslim person who's working a takeaway or a taxi driver, you know, once he's done his 40-hour shift or his 60-hour shift, he's not going to have time, you know, for his family, let alone for these sort of projects. So what we need to do is come up with some idea where we push ourselves economically as a community. And those are the hard, difficult steps that we've got to take, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, I'll tell you what's a really good thing to do. I mean, it's a fascinating thing to visit a synagogue or visit a Jewish. I went to an organisation in Leeds to look at how they organise their welfare. It's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And it's not rocket science. The thing is, I mean, this is how they started. Not only were they synagogues, but they used their funds. They used people used to donate, but they used those funds for their projects. So I mean, how many of our mosques actually spend some of the money that they raise on projects? You know, let's create a fund. If we had a fund in each mosque to do project activities that we need, things that we need, pay youngsters to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, it's developing that culture, isn't it?
It's developing that thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
change those behaviours.
That's what I'm saying. If you don't get them round the table, discuss these things. You know, I mean, this list I showed you. These
this
projects.
are small, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look
at all these things that synagogues are funding.
Exactly.
So, you know, we've got an institution, we've got 1,000 mosques, we've got institutions ready-made there, and they are the hub of the community, and that's how the Jewish community was successful, they use those. But unfortunately, we want to create bigger mosques, or we want to make them more luxurious, or, you know, do other things, invite speakers from Pakistan talking in Urdu that none of the youngsters understand. People are not interested, youngsters are not interested. Let's start doing things, you know, with the youngsters, creating projects, creating a fund, put a percentage of your mosque fund aside to do those things, and you'll find people will come, youngsters will come.
I guess essentially, because as you said, the fact is because we've got 1,000 mosques.
Yeah.
The reason we've got 1,000 mosques is because almost 1,000 different interpretations of the truth. So there's your first barrier, and what we're trying to say is the things that create those division, as you were saying, can we put those to one side?
Yeah.
Let's leave the theology in the box and work together and try and develop our communities. You know, there's no reason why, because you prefer to pray a certain way to them, that you can't work together for the good of the community is almost what we're proposing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, get them together, get the mosques together, say, okay, now let's have a discussion about community, what work the mosques are doing in the community.
But don't we have organisations like the Lancashire County mosques who meant to do this? So why have they failed not to do this?
I think that's a question for them, but then again, you'll find it'll be dominant by one particular belief, and because it's a dominant and that's what they're in, other people will not have an association or attachment or get involved or get help or support what they need from them. So it's like they're there, they're set up, and that's about it.
I mean, if we get an idea like this, let's try and persuade each mosque to have a budget set aside for doing community projects, things that we need. Just have a discussion with them on that.
Or even just one mosque.
One mosque. Get one mosque to do it, and then
That's a start, isn't it?
that's a start.
What
And then
projects would you do though?
I mean, that's really for you locally to decide
what's the need.
You know, it might be to do.
Start with one thing, we can't do everything at once. At least put the first step on the road.
You know, one of
Might be marriage advice, helpline.
it might be marriage support. It might be. You know, we know part of it is the economic reality. You know, we know there's families who, you know, the whole principle of sharing the wealth and not letting the wealth circulate amongst the rich is, if you have that wealth, put part of your mosque funds aside for truly needy people in the society, you know, in our community. Totally legitimate and...
Even better, ask the people who go to the mosque, is that something we should be doing? And they'll tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I think you have to sometimes, like I say, just having a monthly meeting on an issue, and meeting regularly, is the thinking, the idea, changing people's mindset. Sometimes you have to do that work before you can move on.
Well, it's interesting to say that's my next question. When colleagues around the room been involved, and within Blackburn we tried to develop an organisation like that. And I think one question you want to pose to yourself is, what sort of practical advice can you get? Because what's happening, you've got a group of people together, you know, looking at sort of the betterment of our community, and there seems to be a difference in opinion in terms of directing travel, should we say, or priorities. How do we, have you got some practical examples where you work with an organisation where those, you know, sort of debates and tensions can be constructive or
Well, the area that we initiated this organisation, we used to get together everyone.
yeah.
When you say, sorry, because I think it's totally relevant, when you say we,
Who actually didn't come from me.
but who is we? Because to me that's part of the fundamental issue.
It actually didn't come from me, the idea.
Yeah, whoever it is. How did you come together? On what basis did you come together on?
Who used to work in the
And how do you
council,
sort of move forward at that?
council and in the community and whatever.
Is it in Manchester?
No, it's not Manchester. I don't want to name it
No, that's right, yeah.
because I work for that.
No, it's fine. I'm just thinking that it's how practical, you know,
But
practical steps.
it was actually one of the businessmen who said, it would be good to just meet together to discuss how we can make. There weren't any councillors there.
Yeah.
And these were some people who worked in the council, some people who were in charge of community centres. And we just met over certain issues, just discuss things. And, you know, let's discuss Prevent, for example. And it was decided that nobody in that town would support Prevent. And this is in a town where there's a major person that the government's been working with to promote that Prevent agenda, and all the organisations, because of those people, decided not to support Prevent initially.
The question is, how do you come to that consensus of not supporting Prevent?
Well, you have to have people who talk about it.
Yeah.
People have knowledge of it. Sometimes obviously I was there and invited to actually talk to them. I used to go regularly, but I had an understanding of the issue. There might be on another issue somebody else has got better understanding. You invite them. I mean, I'll give you another example. In another town, actually in Oldham, before the Prevent agenda, they were trying through the Racial Equality Council to launch this almost a prevent type agenda through older before it was national policy. And nobody understood it, so somebody sent it to me, and we had all these Muslims on this racial equality council. And I sent them my comments, and despite the fact that the head of that race equality council was supporting it, they all rejected it. So getting people together, inviting people, opening up their ideas, and just carrying on with it and talking through. I mean, where we found that group withered away, unfortunately, and this is the reality, where people decided, some people wanted to use it to further their political interests. So somebody wanted to become a councillor, an MP, and that becomes a major obstacle.
This is a repetition. We constantly see those groups. People have alternative motives to go take a direction or something else.
Yeah.
But who can police a particular group like this? What are we suggesting? Police in the sense of set rules, set guidelines, set directions, agendas.
You learn that. I mean, if you haven't got those skills at the beginning, people find people who have moved. I'm quite happy to, if people want to fire things at me, I'm quite happy to do that. There are bound to be other people in Blackburn who have that ability. But you develop it. It's not hard work.
It's not happening overnight, is it?
Yeah, it's not going to happen
So,
overnight.
would you like to commit to something then? A round table discussion, a dialogue. It could be anything. I mean,
If you get the people around the table, I'm more than happy to open up a debate about having some kind of group here that discusses on a regular basis community issues.
what's the consensus of the room here?
There's no problem with that.
Would we like to have a monthly, just any topic?
Weekly,
Well, it could be anything.
Yeah.
So it was the community.
Yeah, I think in order for it to be constructive, it needs to be sort of, a particular idea or a couple of ideas.
Of course, one topic.
One topic. We've got this group here. Why don't you get together in a week's time or a couple of weeks' time and discuss, explore it, what you want to do, who you want to invite?
I think like to table one, as you talked about most playing with some sort of a party and funding. I like that concept. I can see that concept, helping the community, doing something, and I can sell that idea, concept, to some of the members or some of the local business people that can take that on board. Because the reason I say that I can sell that, because one of the concepts originally I had is to generate some hafiz, and one of the to incentivize hafiz, I'm looking for sponsors to sponsor them so they can study and so on. So the businesses out there that can actually do that, they're prepared to do it. And if there's another for the community project, I'm sure they'll guide the community somewhere. They will kind of say, right, okay, it might be people with the degrees that want to do some projects. And the reason I asked that, because originally when I was setting there was some concepts and idea that I wanted to set up, but I couldn't get the support or help that I needed. So that's what I said. Where are these people? When you mention it, in the conversation, people bring up there's loads of people there. But when you say, right, okay, bring them in, what they need, and then nobody comes forward, and you're stuck into that kind of a pit hole, and then you go outside and there's loads of people there, and you really can get rude with that.
Unfortunately, the way it works is that if somebody wanted to open up his own business to make himself some money, and he wasn't too clued up on certain things, if he needed an engineer, you get a qualified engineer. If he needed an accountant, you get an accountant. If you need someone to do the research, you get the research. If you need something in science, you get the science. When it comes to community issues, we're like, these caps are off. It's like we need that same cap on that we're managing your business. And if we can't do it, we've got someone with the qualifications to do it, and get them on board. And filling the niches wherever there's something that is lacking, get someone who's qualified and actually slot them there. We need medical advice. We want people to, Asian community, some things are taboo, even dieting and health issues. They don't want to go to the doctor. They don't want to tell other people. But if you have something in the masjid that, maybe you've got someone qualified, a doctor who can explain things, the masjid should be the centre of the community. It's not just pray and go home and then lock the mosque. look at this place we're in. It's adjacent to the masjid, it's part of the masjid. It looks different to what it looked like 10 years ago. This wasn't a study centre as it is. But mashallah, people like yourselves, and maybe we would, further for efforts with yourselves and like-minded people who watch it, it would have sort of allowed us to hold this event today. Does that go for that as well?
Yeah. Well, every mosque should have a Muslim community fund. That's my belief. We shouldn't have to create institutions and new charities for everything. The mosque is there, as a brother says, 1,000 mosques. Yeah, they've all got different beliefs, but they're all serving communities.
Yeah, even if they did it for their own.
Even if they did it, there are a lot of people who go to those mosques. So it's an ideal, even if they had a Muslim community fund and targeting the people who come to that mosque with problems, they're doing something. So that's the message we've got to get across, but it's changing the ideas. And look, let's start using some.
Just remember, when 1, 2 or 3 masjids start doing it, and the other masjids here, people will start to talk. Word gets around.
They do. So this concept, by the way, it's not only the one in Blackburn. If you go to Chester Mosque, they've got certain concepts that are looking youth work program and stuff like that. The lot of the changes occur, but we're not getting the use of the facility like they're having a conversation now. It's not taken on. It's not utilised. There's a lot of free time, so people can and some of the project that you mentioned. I said it's the concept. I said, I see that, I can value that, I can see a return on it for the community. So selling that concept or an idea to somebody, I can't see a problem with. So you know what I mean? It's a case of what you can. Where are these people that want to do something? And even I know one voice came and one of the concepts I told them, and then I'll be up front. I'm talking on the camera now. I said, why are we setting another group? You've got a mosque that you can say to attach yourself to, which has got almost 1,200 people on their database. You've got association contact with it. Why do you want to set another group up? Yeah, what can be part of that group? What can be part of the mosque? What can't you be part of the mosque? Yeah, do what you need to do, but have an associated attachment to a mosque for it. Why do we need to generate that another group for it? You don't need it. You're part of the community. Use the mosque.
Asif, Wakar, you're biting your tongues, lads.
Can I ask you a question? You talked about.
Hey, bro, can we ask Asif? Let's have Asif.
No, I think, let's not stir, but it's a valid point you're making, and maybe that's what Abrar is saying, and what we are saying is just to learn from these mistakes. Instead of taking poor position and saying we can't negotiate, let's say, look, this is what happened, could it have been differently? People will, as long as people are willing to adjust their position and say, okay, it seems sensible, I think that's a dialogue that needs to happen.
I would be surprised if there were any mosques that actually asked young people why they don't get involved, and what the barriers are.
Yeah, it tends to be, rather than asking, it's telling.
Why don't you listen to them? Why don't we start listening? Do a survey, do it professionally. Get their opinions, that's what they're used to. Everybody else surveys them. So let's get them, you're not going to get them into a meeting like this, but let's find a way when it's Jamal or something saying we're doing this survey, we want young people, we want to hear what they're saying.
Jahang, can I ask you, because I guess we've come together, myself and Mohammed, I guess we've set up this group to try and promote different areas of work, and alhamdulillah, we know we have the support of a lot of people, and we try and support people at the same time. Essentially, we've come together in a centre that's supported by a masjid. We've come together as Muslims, and for me, one of the issues that I know we have obstacles with is in terms of when you come together, what is the importance of our belief? What underpins what brings us together? And I think that potentially is quite often divisive. This issue of identity, and everyone here has been party to those discussions as in terms of should religion be part of what we're trying to do, or should we leave religion at the door and move forward as Pakistanis, as people from Blackburn, as a community, and to me that fundamentally is one of the divisive issues. And you know, people will have different perceptions of how we need to come together and whether religion needs to be part of it or not. And how would you say we address this? I see it as quite a fundamental issue in terms of ensuring that you all, you know, are viewing life through the same lens.
Yeah, I mean, that has to be part of the process. I mean, as I've tried to do in this talk, you know, I'm not just focused on the organisation. I've been showing you that this is the Islamic requirement, and we have to put those ideas on the table as well. But obviously, immediately, you know, if you start getting into those type of divisive issues, as far as identity is concerned, I think, you know, Pakistani and this identity, that's finishing. All these identities. First of all,
I didn't say that.
No, that was really interesting.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a big reason why. Because the government and local councils have decided they're not going to fund anything called Pakistani or Bangladeshi or Gujarati anymore. They won't fund anything that's mono-ethnic. Because they themselves have found that this is divisive.
But at the same time, they're saying multiculturalism has failed. So what are they funding?
Well, I think they will fund less and less. Is the obvious answer, because they don't have the money. They might fund a few prevent-type projects. Yeah. But, you know, in Oldham, Pakistani Centre had its funding cut 3-4 years ago because it's called Pakistani. And same will happen here. So that will be less of an issue, I think. And I think there's already a change has happened amongst younger people who actually see more of a Muslim identity than they do. I think there's still, amongst a certain age group, middle-aged and above, that people are still attaching to those loyalties. But you know,
Sorry, personally, I disagree with that.
Really?
No,
I would say, because I think, you know, again, shouldn't be saying, but I don't think it's most individuals or groups. It's based on culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
We are all Muslims, but some of us come from Pakistan, some come from India, or whatever. And a lot of our traditions are based on culture rather than religion, unfortunately. And I think will always be the case, because as individuals and as communities, we want to cling on to those traditions, because that's what, if not, differentiates us from somebody else. Not in a negative way, you know, that's our little, how we term ourselves, you might want to call it identity, whatever, but that's how we sort of group ourselves together. And I think that will always happen. For example, our parents have been here since the 60s, you know, we're 50 years down the line, and we're still, the thing that's sort of binds us together, which possibly should be Muslims, is whether you know, Pakistanis or Gujaratis or whether you know, Punjabis or Kashmiris or whatever. Yeah. And I think that's here to stay. No, maybe I personal view. I think it might get tapered around the edges, because other than if that wasn't the case, then we would all become English.
Yeah, but I think that isn't a problem, because Muslims will always come from different parts.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But you know, the problems that Pakistanis are facing, I can tell you, I mean, just an example, the marriage issues. Somebody from the Gujarati community phoned me about a month ago, and I mean, I know about the issues in the Pakistani community to do with marriage, but this brother was dealing with a lot of marriage issues, and he said, I need an imam. I said, you've got plenty of imams. He said, no, I need a non-Gujarati imam. I said, why? Because when I'm arbitrating between these people, they always ask for a non-Gujarati imam, because they don't want the Gujarati imam to know everything about what's going on. So I had to find him somebody from London, so he could involve the imam in these things. So if we focus on the community issues and the problems, no mosque, no matter what their different thing is going to say, well, no, actually, it's okay for you to have this type of behaviour and that type of behaviour, because the basic fundamentals to do these things, are not permissible in anyone. So if we come at it from that angle, the same with the youth, no mosque is going to say drinking is allowed. No mosque is going to say this drugs is allowed. No mosque will say, this is how you deal with a marriage solution, or this is what haq mail you're entitled to. So I think You know, that's the beauty of centering things around the mosque. That you get that consistency, even though there are differences. There's an underlying, and you get that Islamic content coming in automatically.
I think I was going to say, whilst Pakistani and Muslim identity, you can, you don't necessarily have to side and decide, but the question of identity is so profoundly important to move forward until that's decided by individuals, even as an individual myself. Unless I'm sure of who I am, I will move forward on that basis and fight for the causes I believe in. So if you are Pakistani, Gujarati, Iranian, Muslim this, Muslim that, identity profoundly is very important to moving forward socially. If you can't get that right, and this is where the disagreement are occurring in our community, is sense of direction where we're going. And one possible, going back to your discussion, one possible reason that the elders did so much better than our generation, because we're quite fragmented now, and a little bit disillusioned, etc., is because they had a sense of identity. They were Pakistani or they were Gujarati, and they worked from that basis. The question of integration and who we are never. And even taxi drivers, not Pakistani taxi drivers, if you like, in Pakistan, are quite sure of who we are. They don't know, am I English, am I British, I'm Pakistani. I'm sending my money home to my brother in Pakistan, and that's the end of story for me. So they can get on with what they're doing. I think the difficulty lies for us, personally, as when we are kind of deciding who we are, and at this stage, sadly, if that... I mean, Nasser, I would be from Pakistan himself. And if you ask Nasser, he's quite sure he's Pakistani, I'm sure. You know, there's confusion.
Let him speak for himself.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry about that. But what I'm saying to you, but let's not distract from your message. Let's not distract one from what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is the question of identity is vitally important. However you come to it, you have to come to it to move forward. You won't get anywhere unless you go down to it.
Sorry, can I just disagree with that? Because I think the question isn't about what we are and who we are and why we're here. It's about what the issues are. Yeah? And that's what we should be focusing on.
Yeah.
What the problem is, we're all getting hung up around identity, values, morals, whatever. The way you progress things is identify an issue, or issues, and deal with those issues. Because you could have white communities and black communities and Asian communities and Muslim communities working together because they've got similar issues. We seem to get hung up around who we are and why are we who we are.
No, but I agree what you're saying.
Can we have one response to that? And then we'll probably want to bring it to a close.
I think we're making too much of an issue of the identity thing, because Muslims have always been in different places. Sometimes they've accommodated culture from elsewhere when it's not contradicted Islam. Sometimes culture goes astray and it has to be brought back. This is part of the reform process, and the mosques need to be part of that. But ultimately, when you're born, whether you're Pakistani or Bengali, you're brought into this world as a Muslim, and you perform Muslim rituals. When you marry, you perform the Sharia Nikah. When you die, you'll be buried as a Muslim. When you have Ramadan, every Muslim will be fasting. So, we need to look at all the things that bring us together. And, if there are issues that are confusing people, the imams have to, the mosques, they have to, it's their role to continuously actually, stress the Islamic dimension, that we are one ummah, that it's our Islamic responsibility, and it's an Islamic responsibility to deal with these issues, community issues that we've got, and to be organised and self-reliant.
Okay.
That'll be a task.
I think we've got to have one more question.
As long as everyone's happy with that, because I guess
sorry. My question, you talked earlier about doing this numbers game, and the fifth and meal, whatever. How important is it, you think, we still engage in that process? I understand everything you said about, how we're generated by doing other things, but surely that is an important process, which unfortunately we are numbered with, shall we say?
Yeah.
So how should we engage in that process, or not?
Well, I think, obviously there are differing opinions on that. My own personal view is that particular approach is not going to bring results for the Muslim community. I understand there's a need at local level to engage and to get involved, but as with the geese thing, this is your ideology, and you have to be part of that. A geese can never become a dove or a chicken. And unfortunately that's what people are doing, and they're going into these things and they end up in a different place a lot of times. Get yourself organised. I mean, once you're organised as a community and you have leadership and you have proper authority, then lots of options open up for you into how you get involved, what you get involved, what's permissible, what's not. But I mean, you're going to spend 20, 30 years living and dying for the Labour Party. You have to make a decision. Would you be better off spending 20 and 30 years serving Allah and the mosque and the local community? What are you going to get? You'll become famous, you might get in the Lords, you might become in the cabinet, you might personally benefit, but you spent all your life serving somebody else's agenda. And is that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires you to do? So, which one would you choose? At the end of the day, when we leave this world, we're going to have to answer up there, what did you do with your time? And personally, we're also, I have this problem with, you become a politician and then you have to lie. You have to deny your own beliefs. So sometimes you have to say, and how can, as a practicing Muslim, you start to say, well, no, actually I don't believe this anymore, I believe this agenda, that agenda. And then, if the party tells you, follow this line, you start to support the party and start concocting all kinds of excuses to support that, and then 10 years later you change, actually I didn't really believe that. So,
but that's true of community also.
Yeah.
In a community, when you're collectively making a decision, you have to subordinate your own particular viewpoint to the benefit of the group of people you're with. So in the end, I don't think it's that different. For the greater cause, it may be communism or socialism or capitalism,
Yeah, I think it's a bit different in the sense that you have a totally different ideological framework and beliefs. But it's people need to make that decision themselves. That, as I say, do you want to spend 30 years saying yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir? Sadiq Khan's an advisor to Ed Miliband, helped him get in power. How does that help the Muslim community? It's not helpful at all. Might have helped him.
Okay, just to Jazakallah for the Jahangir for coming down and doing the session with us. Jazakallah again for the rest of us for attending, and inshallah, hopefully we'll have more events coming soon, and we'll get back to you whether we're going to have a second meeting and brainstorm a few things, what we can do locally, inshallah, and hopefully, remember, it's all, the more we talk together, get around the table, it's going to be productive for us and the community where we are, and we'll take it from there, inshallah. Okay.